sometimes we confuse control with they care. My baby's due in the next 2 months. I need to find a home. I wish more of us learnt to say, no, thank you, not right now. I'll get back to you on that. Just remove that pressure.
So welcome back to the Next Level podcast. On today's episode, we have Gi Dhanoa. Now, I'm very excited to announce that Gi is an international speaker. She's been in property for some years, but she's the co-founder of Ublossom that helps entrepreneurs and people within the corporate world that may be lacking in clarity and direction. So Gi, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So let me start by asking you, what shaped you into the person that you are today?
Very interesting question. I think what shaped me to the person I am currently now is most definitely being appreciative of life. So in 2015, I had an opportunity. Well, I had 2 instances where I nearly lost my life. So that very much quite quickly made me realize that I'm meant to be here on this earth. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
What were those instances?
So the first one was I was in a long-term relationship, which unfortunately turned into a violent and mentally abusive relationship for the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. So that was one instance where literally my life flashed before my eyes after a violent incident. And if no one's ever experienced it, your life is literally flashing before your eyes and you're thinking, how the hell am I going to save myself here? So in that instance, I had to beg for my life because that's all I could do. There was a weapon above my head to finish me off as such. And I literally talked down my ex-partner to make him realize he didn't want to do this. So that was the way in which within seconds I had to coax the situation into one that gave me another opportunity to be here today. The second instant was when I gave birth to my daughter. Little did I know that actually the crash team came in to save me. It was looking not very good that I was going to survive after giving birth to my daughter. And that was quite interesting because initially we had the emergency team for her because they thought she had a weak heart. She wasn't going to survive, but she was a little fighter. So she came out, although when she was born, and you know, you're a fellow parent as well, you want to hear them cry. Mm-hmm. You want to know that they're okay and they're taking in oxygen. That didn't happen initially. So I remember asking very highly drugged up, saying, why is she not crying? Why is she not crying? Yeah. So, but no, then she did. And then I remember they removed her within 30 seconds of grief. And then it was more attention on me. And then after a couple of blood transfusions, got stronger and I'm here.
So there's obviously a lot to sort of dissect from that. Take me back to the time where you just had a weapon above your head. Tell me more about that. Excuse me.
So it was an interesting one because I was in a long-term relationship for 9 years. It was at the beginning, call it the honeymoon period as we do, it started off really well. To my interpretation, it started off well. But then as I grew older and maturer within that relationship, I realized that I had no clue what a healthy relationship looked like. So now on retrospect, I can go, this is why I put up with this. This is why I believed yet another promise, or this is why, you know, I gave many, many ample of chances. And then something switched and, you know, I always knew because I was there for him as I thought a good partner should be through thick and thin. So that was my choice. I chose to stay. So it was quite evident that there was mental health issues that came on the surface within the relationship. I stuck by them. But when that mental health, so it was bipolar, and when bipolar starts, the person with bipolar ends up trying to finish your life, then I think that is a time to get out, basically. So the actual incident, and that was the last time I was in the Caribbean because I haven't returned back since, which I think is the right decision by me and my daughter, was actually, and now this sounds really strange, and this is what bipolar is like, living with someone with bipolar. We were actually waiting for a fridge delivery. We were waiting for a fridge delivery, sat in the front yard, and then all of a sudden I must have grabbed something in the room, and the next thing I know, I'm being beaten up, and then the next thing I know, a weapon's being swiped off the drawer of, you know, where things were like ornaments and stuff, and then it's me, which it never got to that magnitude before, but it should never have got to that magnitude either, to where I was in that position, because the first blow was 5 years before that. So for 5 years, and the intensity of the violence and the abuse got more and more and more. And I know some people say, you know, why didn't you leave and why didn't you do such? But to put it into perspective, I actually chose a partner which was probably a taboo within my community. So I chose to be with a guy from the Caribbean, and that probably, it doesn't sit well within the community. So I had that much more to kind of call it proof. I wanted to prove that much more, that my relationship, because I chose this person against people's wishes, or against people saying, not even saying because of the cultural difference, but probably because he just wasn't showing the actions of a good partner.
Against whose wishes?
I would say probably more so my dad. Probably against my dad, because it was a taboo to be, you know, marrying into a different relationship or being with someone from a different background. But to be fair, we've actually grown up in a Western society, so that's always been. So I'm not from a very traditional family, but yet there are certain things that in a parent's eyes are a little bit of a non-negotiable.
Yeah.
So me being me, I would test that boundary.
And obviously you just touched on there that it wasn't the first instance, it happened actually 5 years ago. Was that mental or physical abuse?
So it's funny, because I didn't even know about mental abuse, that it was actually, I was probably being manipulated from the word go, and I hadn't even realized that. Yes, it was physical. It was the 5 years in the latter part of the relationship. It was the first physical incident, but the control, I hadn't realized I was constantly being controlled. So things like not going to the beach. Oh, don't wear that dress today. And I'll be like, why? Like, I love it. So there were things which I found out later, because when you're in there, and one thing, as you know, whether it's ladies or a gent going through the situation, sometimes we confuse control with they care. So I think that is probably where my naivety was, that I thought he cared for me, or he was contributing towards a decision that I was going to make, but little did I know it was probably fully to his own benefit.
So for anyone that is listening, excuse me, what were some of the signs of mental or physical abuse that you experienced throughout your time during that relationship?
There was a lot of manipulation. So there was a lot of, so this is probably when things got a little bit more consistent, let's say, within the abuse, but things like making me feel guilty, because if I didn't do something a certain way, they would actually think about suicide. And that was constant. That was quite a constant, and it was quite scary, because at times I was here. So for someone to play with that on your mind is quite serious, and you don't want someone to, you know, take their life because of the consequences that you did or didn't do something. The other signs, as mentioned, were the level of control, not wanting for me to speak to my family, not wanting me to go to certain areas and places. And it was really funny because, you know, the control was also long distance as well, which was interesting, because my friend picked up on it and she said, why has your mood changed? Why has he now made you feel a certain way? Because it was language. Language is so powerful to kind of take over someone when you have an emotional connection with someone. So that in itself is a weapon. Yeah,
I think your words are very powerful. And it leads me on to, you literally just touched on it there. Did you ever feel isolated from friends and family? And I don't think it has to be physical or mental abuse, or it can be both. But I know certain people that would be listening to this when it's released, that have been in your situation, that have gone, I can't get out, but I feel isolated. I don't know what to do. How do I get out? What would your advice be if you did feel isolated?
I absolutely did feel isolated. So let's just put this into perspective. Like a dream home, you would think in the Caribbean is like, a detached home with a swimming pool, gated community, or, beautiful mango trees and so forth. I had all that, but I was still lonely in that. So that meant nothing to me. So when people present a lifestyle, I think connection is probably the most important thing that I look for now going forward. So I forgot the question.
No, sorry, about isolation.
So yeah, I absolutely did feel isolated because I started disconnecting away from my mum, started disconnecting from my sister, started probably not lying, but not sharing. So that's, started retreating from my family that I'm originally very close to. And that was a choice I made in order to kind of put my relationship before my family. So I would definitely say I was guilty of that. Let's say I put the relationship on a pedestal, which it didn't deserve.
But I suppose it's hard if you love that person.
So again, from retrospect, what was love? It was for me, when I look back now, I'm like, oh, I was the only one putting into this relationship. I was the only one compromising here. And he was living the lifestyle that he wanted to live. And there was, call it mental abuse, violent abuse, and then there was financial abuse as well. So I was funding a lifestyle that it was for our future, but it wasn't for our future, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does.
Yeah.
And obviously you've again touched on the fact that he had bipolar. Did you know he had bipolar from the very beginning, or?
No, it actually surfaced, I would say, maybe 2 to 3 years into the relationship. So I got a very unusual call, and I had people calling me saying something's not right with him, and I was like, what do you mean? So and at that time I was here in London working and he was in the Caribbean. So so I took an emergency flight and I thought, what's going on here? And you could evidently see, it's crazy because sometimes when mental health goes to an extreme, you can really see it in someone's eyes and face. So it got to that level, sadly. And it started with, we had a music studio in the Caribbean. We were quite well connected to like reggae artists and stuff. So it was actually bullying within the music industry that I believe personally triggered off his bipolar. So he was in an intense environment where people were talking about his decisions. So that's an interesting one, his decisions to settle with a woman that wasn't from the Caribbean. So it was interesting that, in my personal opinion, I think that triggered off something much bigger for him within. So I call it rapid cycling, because I had to educate myself very quickly. What did mental health mean? And, the doctors said they think it's bipolar. And then I researched into it. I almost became very, very knowledgeable that many, many years ago about that. Really made me grow up, because I didn't respect mental health as much as when a partner, somebody you love, starts experiencing it and you want the best for them and you want to know how you can support them. But there's a difference between supporting them and wanting them to do stuff and they don't want to. So there's a big difference in that.
So what did you put anything in place to try and help him?
Oh yeah, we there was medication option, there was psychologist options, there was cognitive behavior therapy, there was all sorts of support, but he didn't wish to proceed with them.
And there's only so much you can do. And again, people listening will probably feel the same as you did. But there is only so much that you can do if the other person doesn't want to help themselves.
Absolutely.
And obviously you had to get out of there. We will come back to that, but take me back to when you gave birth and the little miracle was born.
Yeah. So she was born. I still remember that day till like as it is now. She was born, met her for 30 seconds, gorgeous little brown eyes staring back at me. Yeah. And I was like, oh, you're mine, you're all mine. And at this decision, so I already knew that I was going to be a single parent at this stage. So I actually found out I was pregnant on that last incident. So when I came back to the UK and never returned back to the Caribbean, that's when I realized I was pregnant. So I had a conversation with myself. I encourage loads of people to have a conversation with yourself when you come to a tough decision, because your gut will guide you. So I knew I wanted to be a mum. So yeah, when that beautiful little girl came, it was an absolute miracle, really. It was gorgeous.
How did it make you feel when your daughter was it taken away? Because we had that with my son, Albie, and it's not a nice feeling.
No.
It's not a nice feeling at all. But yeah, talk me through that moment. What was going through your head?
So when she was taken away, I didn't know that I wasn't going to see her for the next 4 to 5 days. That wasn't even, I didn't even know that was going to happen. So as mentioned earlier, so I was actually fighting for my own life. So the doctors didn't actually want me to move. They wanted me to recover, which is fully, I get it. But every day I'd be like, can I go see my daughter? Can I go see my daughter? They'd be like, no, you're not strong enough. No, you're not strong enough. And got to say they were really short staffed as well. So even if you hit the button, you're not getting anyone. So just forget that. But I got to a phase, which I think it was coming on to the 5th day now. And I want to see my baby. I'm a mum, and you've got that maternal feeling, you have emotions, hormones going within your body, and just you want that closeness and connection. And the fact that, I've not even held her hand yet, because when I saw her for 30 seconds, it wasn't a holding 30 seconds. It was a, here is your baby, I'm holding your baby. So it was quite different. I hadn't even touched her yet. So I remember my mum, bless her, she was visiting me in recovery and visiting my daughter upstairs. I said, Mum, can you please go and hold her? And my mum said, they won't let me. They want you to be the first person to hold her. So I think that clicked a switch in me. So, off I grabbed myself off the bed, blood transfusion one side and I don't know, liquids on another side. I think I had like 3 or 4 tubes in me, and I just got everything around me so I could kind of stand up, hit that button, and they looked at me like, what are you doing? I was like, grab the wheelchair, we're going to see my baby. And they couldn't believe it, like, what are you doing? And I was like, we need to go see my baby, because I think you got to think about the almost in a way the mental stress that a mum's going through with separation anxiety. So I needed to go see my girl, and I hadn't even known, she went from high dependency to something different dependency. And I was like, they're like, oh, she had jaundice, did she? I don't know, you didn't tell me.
Wow. Okay.
So, and she was on a heart monitor thing for at least 2 weeks, I think.
Where does the drive come from for yourself? Because there's obviously, you mentioned earlier, you had to kind of prove something in order to sort of stay with your ex now, and then there's a drive in business, which we will touch on, to be successful in your eyes, no one else's. But again, this is my baby, I'm going to get out no matter what the cost is. Where does that drive come from?
I can only describe it as an inner strength. And I think I've always been motivated and driven, but maybe I've been more driven through emotion, I would say. So it's that emotional feeling that gets you up off that bed. So that's only how I could describe it. And then again, just the way, yeah.
And I mean, I would relate this back to to kind of your ex. Was there sort of a cost involved with being with him, and then when you left him, like with your daughter being born as well, was there a cost involved with that, like with your family? I mean, you've touched on it briefly. You and your dad had a bit of a situation.
Yeah.
What was the cost of you leaving your ex? I mean, even with your partner as well, with you being pregnant.
So when I found out I was pregnant, I myself consciously made this decision of leaving to make it easier for the family and not to cause friction within. So I literally was pregnant, probably to not knowledge of everyone within the immediate household. And it sounds crazy, but I was like, how long more can I hide it? How long more can I find, hoodies to make go, is something all right with her? So in a way, I kind of, out of respect, at that point in time, I thought, right, I think I was about probably 4 months pregnant. And I thought, I have to go now. It's not going to be possible anymore. And then, I feel blessed that I had friends at work that said to me, look, you can come stay with us. And then, a lovely lady did come to my, I didn't have anywhere to live. So I stayed in her spare room. But, being honest, it didn't feel like home. It wasn't home. It was her home. It was her spare room. And as with many spare rooms, we have other stuff going on in those spare rooms. So, I couldn't really imagine the lifestyle of me raising a daughter there. So I remember it got to a bit of a stage where things didn't feel quite comfortable anymore there as well. Because, it's one thing somebody saying you can stay, and then there's another thing where you go, things don't feel right here. So I started flat hunting like discreetly and started looking for somewhere, because I thought, no, I'm the parent. I need to find a home for me and my little girl. And then people say this to me, but I manifested after looking at the state of what's available in London flat-wise. I was like, are you kidding? I'm not raising a daughter here. And the other thing was, estate agents didn't want to know that you're pregnant. So I thought, okay, I clicked on quite quickly. A lot of landlords said, no kids, no kids. So I was like, well, this isn't going to work, is it? So I kept saying to within my very close friends, I was like, I need that place I lived in many years ago for uni. That's what I want, like a flat with a separate kitchen, separate this. I just need that. And I remember during my looking in that period, 10 o'clock at night, that flat appeared back on Gumtree. Don't tell me how it happened, but it was there in front of my eyes in my desperation in that week of, I need to find a home. My baby's due in the next 2 months. I need to find a home. I remember ringing her, and rest her soul, she actually passed away last month, my landlady. So I rang Mari. I was like, Mari, take it off. I'm coming back. I was like, do you want a reference? Gee, I know you. You don't need nothing. You just come back when you want. So there it was. There was the flat waiting for me and my little girl. And so this is the truth. So knowing how I experienced other landlords, I didn't tell her I was pregnant until a year later, after Ivor was 1 year old. So then I said, by the way, Mari, I had a baby. And she was like, what's her name? Tell me about her, and so forth. But Mari was like an exceptional lady. So she was 100%, she's a family woman and understands that, and I remember I said to her, and she was just so happy for me. And that was beautiful, that there was a blessing out of all of this. And my family close to me say that I underestimate the power of manifesting, because there's a couple of things I've manifested which I can't think of now, but they laugh with me, say, keep manifesting. I was like, okay.
It seems to have worked pretty well so far.
It has, yeah, it has.
And obviously, moving on to today, let's talk a bit more about your businesses. So I'll let you take it away from there, because you've done so much in quite a short space of time, haven't you?
Yeah. So as we all know, the pandemic hit. So I was working at Heathrow as a project manager, and then redundancies were being talked about. And I just put my hand up and I was like, me, can I please take the voluntary redundancy? It was a shock to everyone. They're like, gee, we thought you were happy. But my vision changed of what my future, what I wanted it to be. And I think when so I was from consultant to client side. So I'd made a transition between there within Heathrow Airport. And I think for the first time within a year, I realized I didn't want to chase the corporate ladder anymore. I didn't want to be a director for a company that wasn't my own. So that transition really helped me open up my eyes of what was important. And I think the important thing was making decisions that benefited my future as opposed to someone else's future. So so then I took the voluntary redundancy. I have a business that didn't work out. So I was starting off with sourcing. It didn't quite fit right for me, my lifestyle, but alongside sourcing, that company was also doing project management, and the project management side kicked off. And that's where I feel very blessed with all my friends in my past circle. I've had an opportunity to be involved in some international projects, like I headed up a certain part of the FIFA World Cup last year. So that was fantastic, stressful as hell, short-term stress, but really worth it.
Yeah. One thing that amazes me is that you've gone through all of this, but you've maintained a huge amount of confidence. How have you managed to do that?
So thank you for saying that, but that's not true. So I would say, as shared earlier, so the latter 5 years of my relationship were not good. And then 5 years after that relationship, I think I was building myself back. So there was a period of building myself back. And I think the G that you see today has taken time. So of course, when you come out of something traumatic, or some of the things you didn't even understand what were happening at that time, but then slowly things started picking back up. That took time. That didn't happen. But thank you for saying that.
It's what I can see in front of me. What did you have to implement over that period in order to build your confidence back up after being knocked down for so many years?
I think, so one thing I didn't share was when I was going through that violent and abusive time, I actually never told my family. So they never knew that I was going through that. So nor did I reach out to anyone to say that I need help at that point in time. It all came out afterwards when I realized enough was enough. So that's when I move forward. Blank moment.
Take your time. It's not a problem.
Remind me the question again.
What did you implement?
Yeah.
Over the 5 years.
So the biggest thing that I implemented was putting myself first. So I think in the 9-year relationship, and even probably before that, so my characteristic prior to that was always putting others first and serving others. And for the first time, when it was just me and my little baby girl, it was me and her first. And I think that was part of my healing process. That was part of my decision making, which was to benefit me and my little girl. And more importantly, me. And I was thinking about this today, actually. We get told and I know this is something you've mentioned recently, and I really resonated with it, that we almost get told putting yourself first is selfish. And I'm really sorry, but I disagree with that. It absolutely isn't. We have to take care of ourselves first. We've got to make sure we're grounded. We've got to make sure we're centralized before we can even offer ourselves to anyone else. And like you said, even before we offer ourselves to our kids, we need to make sure that we're okay. So it was about changing my mindset. And I think it's clicks with me that happen. So it's a switch happens, a realization happens. And that's when I start making different decisions, which probably benefit me as opposed to benefit too many people. Because when a decision gets diluted, or it just doesn't really, it's not very favorable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Been in a situation you was in, and that many people are in that may not realise they're in it. They're going to say, well, I don't know what the signs are. So what are the signs, which you've already touched on, but we'll go over it again. And how do I get out of it?
So the number one thing I would say, we do know what the signs are. Our gut's talking to us, but we decide to ignore it. There's no way, I don't believe, when you get that little feeling, or when you get, oh my gosh, what am I in? Or that wasn't very nice how they made me feel. The signs come naturally because you do know wrong from right. It's simple as that. That there is no I didn't know. I think what there is, I chose not to react, or I chose not to move away from it, because I'm guilty of that. I chose to ignore it for, say, 5 years, and that's where I was in the situation that I was in, because I chose to, as I said, put my relationship on a pedestal it didn't deserve. So I think we do know, and the signs, only you know the signs when behavior starts changing. So it'd be hard for me to share what the signs are, because I would say if something makes you feel uncomfortable, upset, there's some form of trigger then it's something you need to address. It's something that you need to, as mentioned earlier, have a conversation with yourself, and an honest one. We can all have a fictional conversation with ourselves and brush it over and make it look more pretty than it is. But deep down, when you really want to be honest with yourself, and sometimes you might not be able to do it in your head. So scribe it out. Say what's making you feel upset. Getting it on paper is almost a form of evidence to kind of to confirm with you that something's not quite right.
And I completely agree with what you just said. But for anyone listening that doesn't want to do that, what else can they do? Is there anything else that you would recommend?
So I'm going to share what my turning point was. And a good friend of mine asked me, do you see this same life when you're 50? And I love him to bits, because I didn't see myself in the mirror at all at 50. Had I stayed in that relationship, I know he would have destroyed me. So I think if someone doesn't want to address it, just have a look at yourself in the mirror. See how you're actually looking, how you're feeling. Is that the person that you recognize? Because there's always something to compare it to when you are your, most fulfilled, happy self. And then look in that mirror and say, does that seem like the same G that I was before the situation? So I think I'm a big advocate of understanding it yourself before you reach out for help. Understanding what's going on before you have influence from people that love and care for you. But I want to share that I had something that I personally call the yo-yo effect. So you bring people into the equation when you're going through a toxic relationship and so forth. But then you start kind of turning it a little bit against them. Oh, they didn't want me in that relationship, or, it's not fully, you're not committed to your decision. You start going back to the person, away from the person, back to the person. Call it almost like, you're unstable at that state. And it's understandable considering the circumstances that one might have gone through, that you will be not in a very solid foundation to kind of make those decisions. So I think, I think it would be... Lost my trail of thought.
No. So I think it's very important for anyone to realise or recognise, if you are listening to this, there isn't anything wrong with you.
No, there absolutely isn't.
Because a lot of the blame is put on themselves. And in your situation, okay, the gentleman did have bipolar, which is very unfortunate, for which hopefully he has got some treatment for that. But if he doesn't want help, then you can't help him.
Yeah.
People will know that I'm quite blunt. If he doesn't want the help, sorry, but the help is there. If you haven't taken it, it's on him.
Yeah.
End of the day, it's his fault. And the stuff that he's put you through, you've got the help that you needed. You've implemented that, and look at where you are today. You're helping a lot of other people. Tell me about that.
So after that 5-year period that I was saying, past the toxic relationship, it was after the 5 years when I was working on myself, I knew I wanted to give back. I knew I wanted to share my experiences and give back to ensure that I could help in any little way to make sure nobody ever got as close as to death as I did. So I love poetry. So I wrote on Amazon, poetry books for domestic violence, poetry books for mental abuse. I wanted poetry to be connecting with me for what I had gone through. I couldn't find anything. So I was like, oh, no one's written a book or poetry on domestic violence or mental abuse. I thought, well, I'll do it then. So I deliberately called it FFS. So it doesn't stand for that. It stands for Forgiven, Forgotten So. And because I think moving on is so important, that's my past chapters, and I want those to be past chapters for anyone else currently experiencing, a domestic or mentally abused type relationship. It can be part of your past as opposed to your, now, and it part of your future. So I wrote a lot of those poems that I wrote were free form. That I didn't follow rules. I don't like rules. So I wrote it the way I wanted. And you may have seen some of the words are different because they all represent, distance represents distance. And so I deliberately used that canvas, a blank page, to kind of share a story visually as opposed to with words as well, which is obviously my interpretation. So, and I also put myself in others' shoes, male and female, that have been through domestic violence and mental abuse, because I wanted the book to be inclusive. I wanted it to speak to both men and women, but I also wanted it to be a part of their healing journey or a realization, because I think that is, sometimes you need to have, again, calling it the switch moment, where you go, this is happening to me, or I do relate to this. And that could be, hopefully, the start of a positive new future.
Fantastic. Is there a danger that if someone is being manipulated or suffering from mental abuse or physical abuse, that the only person that is potentially showing them love is that individual? That person, the individual, just wants to be loved. There is no one else around them to show them any type of affection, whether it be physical, mental abuse, but that's the only type of affection that they're getting. Have you ever come across that before?
Absolutely. And I think the thing that I've learned, and the thing I stand by now, the only person, or the first ever person, that should be showing you love is yourself. And my sister and I, we did a workshop, and it was one that I facilitated, why your best friend should be you, why you should be your own supporter, forgiver, encourager. It should be you. We're in a society where we look to others for, approval. But I am the opposite. I don't look for anyone for approval. I've been given 2 chances because somebody up there has been looking out for me. I'm like, thank you very much. So I also take that as a sign to help as many as people as I can. And I will never stop helping people, because that is what gives me joy.
Again, I can see that as well. And what about relationships for yourself since obviously what happened? Have you struggled with relationships?
I have, actually. So initially, I would say I wasn't ready for another relationship. And then, I'm going to be totally honest with you, I saw a pattern merging. And this was really an eye-opening situation for me, where I realized 3 months into a relationship, I started sabotaging it.
Okay.
So 3 months in, it was almost like it would get to the point where it could become something a bit more serious, and I'd find any excuse to wriggle my way out of it. So within that period, I had to start working on myself. And I would say, and I was making the wrong decisions on who I kind of wished to date and so forth. So, and now I'd probably say it's the longest time I've been single, but I'm proud of it. It's so important to work on yourself. And I'm not saying, I don't wish to be single forever, but that connection with yourself and that work that we all need to do, sometimes you just got to be honest, say, you know what, a partner right now probably would interrupt what I'm working on myself right now, what I'm trying to build myself back up to being. And I think me and my sister joke about this all the time, but I want someone to complement my life. I don't want, so going from that drama and going from someone, taking care of people, as I mentioned before, has very much been part of my DNA, past DNA, not now DNA. But now very much want someone who complements it. I equally complement it, and ambitious and crazy as I am, and equally want to be, and I think as an entrepreneur, you understand that special moments are sometimes not every day. So knowing, and this sounds weird, but I think the older you get, you realize that actually you crave a different type of relationship as you get older, because you still want your identity. So I think that was one of the biggest parts of understanding. And when you said, what did I implement? I understood the importance of having identity within a relationship. So I am not in a position to compromise that now. So that's kind of my growing up stage.
And I think that's what most people would want at the very beginning of a relationship, certainly, isn't it? It's, well, this is who I am, and this is obviously who you are. Let's merge together and compromise this. Absolutely not. And I'm very much the same. It's, well, I'll do me, you do you. Let's meet in the middle. We can compromise on that if you like. But as long as it doesn't impact me and you add value and I add value to you, then great. If not, part ways. I know that's not what you said, but in a roundabout way.
No, but it kind of is, because, we're both parents.
Yeah.
We both have a past life, which we're proud of. You know, those kids come first.
Yeah.
And whoever comes, I never want them to overtake that.
Absolutely
I
not.
still want my private moments with my little girl. I still want to know, we call them a mummy and Ivor day. Oh, are we having a mummy and Ivor day? And I was like, bless her, she's always having a mummy and Ivor day. It's always mummy. But we do something special on those days. And to be fair, I don't want to bring someone into those days. I actually want to make sure that they remain as independent days for us, for my daughter and I to continue that connection.
So how about trust? Have you struggled to trust anyone else? Or?
So I've always been open-minded. So even after my past long-term relationship, I always treated someone with a clear slate. So trust, as in thinking that someone's going to do something to me, probably wasn't there. So you know how some people may have become quite distanced towards having a relationship. I wasn't distanced towards that idea. I was probably more in the, which I learned later, more so the commitment part, which was interesting because I was like, oh, I obviously flake when there's
Yeah.
But I worked on that because I think what I didn't need was to connect with someone else. I needed to connect with myself first. And there's no wrong or right duration for that, I don't think. I think connecting back with yourself, understanding who I am, because I was 19 when I met my ex-partner. So from 19 to 29, I was actually getting my self-esteem broken down.
Yeah.
I wasn't actually the G anymore. So to find the new G was actually, I didn't know who she was anymore. So I had to go and connect back with her. And obviously now she comes with all the past experience. Now she comes with from, you know, a corporate background. Now she comes with having different businesses. And now she comes with being a mother. So it really took shape with learnings.
And with your, I would say fear of commitment, do you think you'll commit again?
Oh, absolutely. I think the fear of commitment, I think, was very much, I would say maybe like many years ago now. And I think then I kind of worked on myself. And I think, and I definitely know the fear of commitment was probably because I wasn't really connecting with the right people. I wasn't really probably interacting with the people that I know that I've grown up to become now. And probably, you know, they were not on the right wavelength. So absolutely. I mean, I would say I'm looking for, you know, a future life partner, as many people probably are. But as just shared now, it's a different expectation. It's a more balanced expectation. Yeah. I think when you're much younger, there is a form of neediness, or there's a form of realizing that you think you have to do everything together. And I'm like, no, thank you. I don't want to do everything together. Go and have a fantastic time with the boys and come see me later or something, you know, and that's fine because I might have things to do as well.
Absolutely. And I think, I'm 100% with you on that. The commitment for me was, and still is in some aspects, an issue. And I think it comes back down to being selfish, that I'll put myself first.
Yeah.
And if that person isn't on my wavelength, I'm not going to commit.
Absolutely.
And I'll put myself first, and it'll be my kids, then my business,
Absolutely.
and whatever it is. So for me, it's not necessarily an issue, but for people that are not on my wavelength, it's an issue for them. So I'm not going to commit. But again, goes back to the dating situation. I can't help that if they're not, but I'm very upfront and honest from the very beginning. I'm not going to commit if you're not on the same path as me, but if you are, great. I'm more than happy to do that. But there's not very many people that are, let's be honest.
Speak to you in a year's time.
Yeah, that's it. What about therapy? Did you undergo any therapy?
I didn't. So a lot of my healing, well, no, I'll take that back. I tried theta healing. So somebody recommended something called theta healing. Is that something you've heard of? So there's a beautiful lady that somebody recommended, and she's actually become a friend now as well. And it was through theta healing that I learned I was self-sabotaging a relationship. So it was that helped me realize the patterns within that I was creating, the new patterns. And it's so easy to, oh, he's not the one, and it's like, gee, how many times?
Yeah.
How many times is that the same story? But no, I had to be honest with myself, say, you know what, you're part of this situation here. You're the one pushing people away, because how many times are you sending a similar text to different people? How many times are you saying that, you know, it's not for me right now, or call it the get out clause. I was looking for that get out clause when I was dating and, you know, thinking I wanted something serious, but in reality, I probably wasn't ready. And that's what theta healing really helped me realize, that I needed to put myself first. So that putting yourself first, it takes time, because it's a new habit. It's a new positive habit that you're going to do. And of course, there's times that you're going to put others first, or slip up, or, you know, just say yes out of default. But I was actually thinking of it when I was walking at the train station, that just saying no thank you. I wish more of us learnt to say no thank you, not right now. I'll get back to you on that. Just remove that pressure. We're constantly in a world where people do want things from people, but it's like, why do we feel bad in saying no? And the more of us start putting ourselves first, I really feel that we'll be a world of happier people.
I completely agree with that. Just if you could explain a bit more in depth what that theta healing was.
Yeah. So it's how would I best describe it? So you kind of connect with your inner self, and I'm not detailed, but I want to say chakras, because I believe that's what the theta healer practitioner was working on. But you kind of take yourself on a meditative state, and you travel through like you're closing your eyes, you're being guided. So it's a guided meditation. And then you take yourself within a space, a safe bubble. And then you start removing all the kind of negative thoughts that you have. And then you replace them with positive ones. And, but prior to that, you actually do, people call it something else. Because when I was in Canada recently, I described what I was talking about in theta healing, and they call it something else, but I can't remember what it's called. So let me just say, this is me, and you'll say something like yes, 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 no, no, no to a question, and your body would naturally move back and forth to the right answer. So no being a negative, you would move back, and this is your central point, and then yes being, so you kind of it sounds crazy, right? But it's definitely great to experience. It's something that I was open to. So I'd never heard of it prior to that. And it's actually something that I quite enjoyed. So it's something that I would, and it could be for any situation. So that the practitioner will, you know, understand what you want to acknowledge, what you want to understand. And it's almost your body responding. It's your unconscious mind. That's the right word. Yeah. It's your unconscious mind responding to the questions that are being asked.
I think that's the most important thing, is if you enjoy it and you're actually responding to whatever it is, what type of therapy it might be. For me, I've done, like I've said on so many of the podcasts, I've done art therapy, rehab, whatever it might be, CBT. For me, it was art, because I could just shut off.
Amazing.
I can talk to people, no problem.
Yeah.
But when I can't draw for shit, but I could just colour in, I could draw. But I was a little bit younger then. I was a lot younger. But yeah, it was art therapy for me. That was great.
I love that.
Or any type of sport, gym. That was it for me. But if that worked for you, it might work for someone else. And that's what I obviously wanted you to sort of explain it. And hopefully it will benefit someone. What about your daughter? How would you navigate a potential relationship if you see red flags? The same as what you did.
Oh, so you're saying if my daughter was in the situation that I was in? I was going to say I get the shotgun out.
Same as me, but
I would hope, and this is something I'm mindful of. So once I learned what a healthy relationship looks like, I wouldn't want my daughter to experience through me, because it would be through secondary, seeing a future relationship her mum might get into, that it's a positive one, that it's one of support, love, and equal contribution. So that would be the first thing, that I'd hope that I would shape her or guide her in a way for her to showcase what a nice, healthy, happy, fun relationship looks like. Because being totally honest, I don't think I got that as a child. So I didn't quite see, although my parents were together, were they together? Like, were they really communicating with each other? I don't think they were. So I didn't quite see what a good connected family unit looked like. I probably learnt that more from my friends and seeing different friends in a good, healthy relationship. Go, oh, my family is quite different to that. So I would hope that I would guide her enough to make the right decisions. But one thing I would be absolutely there for her would be the openness that I probably wasn't with my own parents. So I'd hope that, knowing that I was always there to steer her in the right direction, but I think most importantly, to listen to her. Because I know when you give too much advice, that's not helpful either. I don't want to push her away, or I don't want to, get her to rebel as I did. And fingers crossed, she's way better than I was at the age she is. Like, I was a rebel, one who was in trouble all the time. And I just think to myself, I feel grateful that she's not at the level that I was at.
Take me back to when you was a child then, because... Yeah, explain what your relationship was like with your parents.
It was one of, I said this to my sister probably a couple of months ago. I said, Mum was actually always at work. Nothing wrong with it. But I love my mum to bits, and she always supported us. But I don't actually remember my mum being there when I came back from school, or, when you kind of needed her. Like, she was working hard. She was working her socks off. So we was mainly with my dad. So we were mainly, there's three of us, my younger brother, me, and then my sister, who's the eldest. So my childhood was probably very much disciplined because my dad was growing us up in after school, putting in good disciplines. Education was a big thing for him, so he was very much into education. So we were like, probably my sister and I were like, we're in top sets in maths, science, English, because that's what he wanted. But my childhood was fun though, because when you give boundaries to a child, it's so much fun to break them. So I was probably pretty much breaking boundaries, especially up to 11. I was always breaking boundaries, finding new ways to like do something, and I never did that.
So you caused your dad a bit of grief then, did you?
Oh yeah. My mum and my dad, I caused them some grief. So I laugh to this day because I tell my daughter these stories. So I was so naughty that my mum would say, go pack a bag and go stand outside the front door. The lady's going to come and get you. I'd be like, Mummy, do I need toothpaste? Like, she'd be like, yes, the lady's coming to pick you. And then I'd say to her, that wasn't that bad. Or, obviously no one came, but it was just the threat of an unruly child.
What about secondary school? What was that like?
It changed. I piped down, as you would say. And then I think you kind of realise that there's a big gap between being 11, 12-year-old to having 16-year-olds in a high school. So there was very much a different kind of place to find within high school. So I very much probably was sussing things out. I still always had my cheekiness, that was my personality. And, couldn't have done that bad because I finished off as a head prefect. So I don't know what I did right. But my rebelliousness was still there. I remember another prefect saying to me, how come you're wearing charcoal grey trousers? How come you're wearing this? And like, you're a head prefect. I was like, who cares? Like, it's about, this is the thing, sometimes we all find things in other people because we want to pick on something or we want to highlight something. But it's just like, let's just look at the bigger picture. Am I causing any harm to anyone with my whatever I'm wearing? At the end of the day, come on, girls did it all the time. We'd always find ways to bend the rules to kind of stylize our uniform. So it was, I would say I became a good girl in high school. Pipe down.
And then what happened after?
Then
what happened next?
College, I was good in college. I actually wanted to be a a music producer. So I really wanted to be a music producer. I did 1 year in like some kind of vocational education, media production, I think it was, and kind of didn't quite feel that I fitted in. And then I kind of went and did the academic stuff, the A levels, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, me and my friends used to bunk off college. You're given freedom, like, you know, that, you're given freedom to explore. And I think that's really important. And that's one thing I would never hold anything against my daughter if I knew she was doing something in a different direction, because I still feel our educational system's still Victorian. I don't think we've actually modernized anything. I don't even think there's any efforts put in to make sure that we're moving with the time. So here as entrepreneurs, we're kind of like, you know, we are going to educate our children in a different way. I can already see my daughter is probably not academic, but more of an entrepreneur. Like this morning she said to me, "Mummy, I want my restaurant to be the best restaurant." I was like, "It will be, sweetheart, because I know you'll be behind that restaurant." So so I think And
when obviously you wanted to go into media, why media?
So I think I kind of chose media as a default because I thought it'd be more accepted with my dad than music, but it was really the music producer that I wanted to be. So I remember I used to like have my own little pretend radio shows and all that kind of stuff when I was little. I'd been writing songs since I was 11. So it started when I was 11.
Oh, wow.
I was writing poetry, and then poetry began to become songs. I couldn't sing, never learnt to sing. And then I thought, who can I give these songs to? And I did nothing with it. So somewhere, there's probably dust collecting on them somewhere. But yeah.
So, and then obviously you went into work.
Yeah.
What was your first job?
So I was 16. I worked for M&S for about 9 years, part-time. So it was making some money, spending some money. And that's another thing, you know, I didn't call it school, call it parents. I didn't even learn how to respect my money. So I was earning and burning. Oh, that's quite nice. I was earning and burning. That's what I was doing.
And then obviously you went and, well, the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah.
And you are where you are now.
Yeah.
And tell us what the next sort of 5 years looks like.
Oh, that'd be exciting, wouldn't it? So I think our focus most definitely is on growing Ublossom, We Blossom. Amrit and I really believe in giving a quality service as opposed to quantity. So that's one thing, you know, when we're working with a company that wants to help their people, their teams with mindset and well-being, we really want to take care of them, as opposed to having so many, you know, clients as such. So we are quite selective who we work with, because there's me and her, so we don't want to stretch ourselves thin at this point in time. We're still in our kind of growth stage, call it. So we appreciate that you don't just grow big overnight. You don't spread yourself thin, because that will dilute the service. So we're very quite strict on our business model of keeping it small, but then influencing, because Amrit and I are really interested in doing a ripple effect of positivity. That's what we want to create. So we want to create some positive vibrations within the corporate world and within entrepreneurs to put themselves first. That's literally what we're doing. Put yourself first, be in a good position, and then you know how to respect others. Because only when you love, respect, and have clarity in your own life can you then respect other people within your team, within your environment, that they too should have the same kind of level of understanding you have of yourself. And I think a lot of us become a certain way, like, you know, upset, aggressive, you know, those kind of negative emotions take over when you're not prioritizing yourself. But once you do prioritize yourself, then it's an absolute different feeling. And I know you glow from that as well.
Absolutely, yeah. 100%. Because if you, as you just touched on there, I think when you recognize that you are the most important person in your life, and then everyone else is just, you're more of a joy to be around.
Absolutely,
Because if you are going to have down days, and then you're going to have positive days as well, but until you can recognize of how you can obviously deal with whatever situation that you're in, the more positive that you can think about yourself, and the outcome it will be positive as well. And I think more people need to put themselves first, but they just don't know how to say what you said previously, which is no thank you, or delay whatever it is that they're being asked to do.
Yeah.
Always have the same question at the end, which is, G, how are you doing?
How am I doing? Much better from speaking with you, so thank you, Lewis. I'm doing well. I'm excited. I've got a live project on at the moment. Amrit and I spoke on the 5D program last night, so that was a pleasure as well. So we spoke on D. Ludlow's platform. So yeah, I'm good. I'm buzzing.
Wicked.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, G. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing the next 5 years play out for you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.